All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to Conversations for Action. I'm Regina Washington, Director of Rural Impact Networks, and today I'm joined by Dr. Russell Olwell, better known to us as Russ. Hi, Russ. He'll be joining us for our September College Access Conversation for Action, which was rescheduled from July due to technical difficulties. So thank you so much for joining in with us today. He is the Associate Dean and Professor in the School of Education and Social Policy at Merrimack College. He is the author of Mentoring is a Verb and a Guide to Early College and Dual Enrollment Programs. The conversation today will focus on high impact practices within college access, and we will primarily focus on mentoring and dual enrollment, which is near and dear to my heart as well. So Russ, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and why do you have an interest in college access and success? Just a little bit about your path to this point and your current role. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me today. So I started off my career very much as someone who wanted to be a historian and kind of a more traditional academic. And then during graduate school, I had a sort of crisis of what I was doing with my life. And so I became interested in education. And so while in graduate school, I pursued a teaching certificate. And then when I graduated my PhD, I taught middle school for a few years before taking a position that was sort of in between education and history at a local college at Eastern Michigan University. And it was there that that was the first time I got to work with an early college program. I worked with early college at ECA, which is a very important early college program on Eastern Michigan's campus. And then I also became involved with Gear Up, which is a nationwide set of programs that really aims to work with students over a 6-year period to get them from 7th grade all the way through college enrollment. And so I ran a Gear Up program at Eastern Michigan for about 1,000 students for 6 years. And then based on that work, I wrote the book Mentoring is a Verb to try to capture some of what our program had learned. And then later I moved to Massachusetts and took a position here at Merrimack College. And one of the first things when I arrived was the college wanted to start an early college program. And so I became involved in that. And so since then, we've built that program to now it's about 150 students a day taking classes on our campus or they just went back. They were here this morning. And so that program really has grown, and I've gotten to watch a lot of programs grow up across Massachusetts and across the country. And out of that experience over the past few years, I wrote the book about dual enrollment in early college. But as you picked up, all of these topics kind of connect to each other. Back when I was just kind of a regular historian, I did write a book about Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and I got to spend a lot of time at Oak Ridge. I would both work in the archives and camp, and so I've gotten to spend a lot of time there, and that was a great experience. But I haven't gotten back to sort of traditional history books since then.
Right, wonderful. And Gear Up, I tell you, and speaking of gearing up, I think people are gearing up for the National Gear Up Week that's coming up September the 20th through the 24th. This is when thousands of people like parents and teachers and students and partners and even college access folks come together across the United States to celebrate Gear Up and the successes, right? And Partners for Education has provided Gear Up services since, I believe, 1999. So Gear Up is definitely a high impact practice in terms of in college preparation and access. Tell us a little bit about how your Gear Up experience has impacted your research.
So Gear Up is an interesting program in that the network of people you meet is really rich. And so I always say, if you can run a successful Gear Up program, you could do anything. You could do anything in life. It is so between the students and the schools and the match and the budgeting. So I both thought it was a great experience, and it's just been a great way to connect to other people, because there are so many people in our community who were part of a Gear Up program or worked for a Gear Up program for a time, and we all sort of have a lot of experiences in common. I think when I started the Gear Up program, I thought for our individual program at Eastern Michigan University, that working with the students intently and really investing in them and tutoring them and working with them one-on-one and working with their families, that this was going to be a magic bullet and that all of the kids were going to go to college and be successful. And I didn't realize till really long into that, and even after it was over, that there were other things there were other structural things that could also help the students. And so a lot of my work in dual enrollment in early college is based on being part of a Gear Up program that really I worked hard. I had hardworking staff. People really put in the time and put in the energy. But the thing about things like dual enrollment in early college is there a strategy that really kind of lifts up some barriers and really gives the students a firsthand knowledge that they can do it. And so I feel like in Gear Up and Upward Bound, which I also worked a lot with, we did a lot of telling kids that they could do it. We did a lot of confidence building and giving them a taste of college and bringing them on tours. But if you're part of an early college program or a dual enrollment program, by the end of the term, you've proven to yourself that you can do it. And so you're in a different place in terms of your confidence. You feel differently about navigating a college. You've worked with a faculty member. And so I think, Gear Up programs are powerful, but adding that component of not only, it's an oversimplification to say it's both practice and playing the game. It's both, you're practicing for something, but the dual enrollment early college piece it's elegant in that you're just taking down this one barrier to students. You're letting them try it. And then out of that, they have this powerful experience that hopefully will really propel them, for a few years. But I think what I also draw from Gear Up is just the importance of that mentoring piece, the importance of working with families, the importance of having kind of these near peer mentors, people just a few years older who can really connect to the students and help them, and the students will listen to. So I think all those things sort of resonate with me out of my Gear Up experience.
Oh, yes. And, I really like how you put it in terms of, you do a lot of talking, a lot of practicing, but it is really in that process of just crossing over into action, or into, as you put it, getting in the game and really showing up and showing out, really, with all the things that you've learned over the course of the experience of Gear Up or Upward Bound, right? And you focused on mentoring in your first book, and you were inspired to do that during your time of Gear Up. And then in your most recent book, the focus is on early college, dual enrollment. Talk to us more about how and why these two areas of focus.
So I think they fit together, and I think I think in particular, dual enrollment in early college, if they don't have a mentoring and support component built in, they become very quickly, they become very quickly a strategy that lacks equity. And so parents and families with resources sort of chase these resources and chase these opportunities and make sure that their students get them and help them kind of navigate the situation. And the students who are going to be helped the most by this strategy don't get it. And so, to me, it's building it's building programs where the support is built in from the beginning. So it's not, you have to fail at the midterm to be offered support. We're offering support all the way through. It's building support into a class. So if you have a class, having a near peer mentor in the class to help students, and just working as hard as we can on the students who we know from the research, if students are on the fence about going to college, a really great dual enrollment or early college experience can just take them right over that finish line, and they can leave that experience feeling like they can do it. And then they can go on and be successful. Without that support, I think it very quickly becomes, another part of American education where families with resources can crowd other families out, and we just end up with the same problems we have now. So I think the mentoring piece is key. The other nice thing about it working at a college is it's a great opportunity for my students who want to be teachers, who want to work with young people, to really, to get in contact with really smart, really ambitious young people who are taking this class, and so for them it's just a great professional experience too, and they get to meet students who are going to inspire them in their career, and who are going to inspire them to be great teachers or great counselors.
Excellent. And you definitely spoke about the importance of equity, especially within rural communities, and how we're engaging various families, and providing that bridge for accessing college. And I know that, as a goal of these conversations is to provide the listeners with information, research, and inspiration to move toward action in their own college access and success work. And I'll turn it over to you to share your insights with the listeners, and talk more about some of the equity, and then also some of the best practices.
Okay, well, thank you. Let me get my screen sharing going. We'll go from there. Great. So that's the cover of my book. Today I'll just talk about early college and dual enrollment generally, and then I'll make sure at each point to kind of focus back in on rural areas, and then also on mentoring as well. But early college in a lot of ways and dual enrollment have been around for a long time. Back, Alexander Hamilton was, as a young man, as a real person, not as Lin-Manuel Miranda, really did try to get through Princeton in 2 years. And so I always say he's kind of the founding father of our field. There were, after World War II, there was an idea that you could redo all of American education to have kind of a 10th through 14th grade as sort of like one sort of early college slice that never really came to pass. There are some very famous models. Bard College, Simon's Rock is one of the earliest in terms of bringing high school students to what's basically a college campus and teaching them. A lot of this work then moved to New York City community colleges. And so this is where a strategy that was very kind of elite and focused on gifted kids all of a sudden gets applied to a very different set of circumstances, and working with urban, students who might be on the boundary between dropping out and staying in high school, creating early college programs for them. As many of you know, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funded a massive expansion of early college, and a lot of this pushed early college into regions that it hadn't been in. So across North Carolina, there's a movement to have early college everywhere, to have one per community college, and that moved it out of this kind of very urban, or in the case of Simon's Rock, this kind of college campus context, and got it out across a wider area. The other state that's huge in the history of early college is Texas. And so Texas, both across rural and urban areas, has really developed one of the most powerful models of early college and dual enrollment. North Carolina and Texas lead the country in terms of creating early colleges. They've also done the most research, so I'll talk a little bit about their research in a minute. And these kind of big statewide programs like Texas and North Carolina, I think, had a very powerful impact, both in some urban centers, in some suburban areas, but really got this model out into areas it hadn't been in yet. And that was a strategy to really make sure the whole state had access to these. Just a few definitions. So when we're talking about early college and dual enrollment, it's giving access to college level coursework. So it's really just dropping a barrier for high school students. I always say it involves dedicated and targeted student support. So each student in the program knows where they can get help, and that help is really normalized. That it's not something unusual to look for a tutor or someone to help you with the class. I really aim in programming to have the same college coursework, the same syllabi as the students on campus. In the program I run, we use college faculty, but many programs use high school faculty as well, who are credentialed by the college. The location can vary, and during the pandemic, that's happened, where today we have students on our campus. Last year, we didn't have a student on our campus the whole year because of the pandemic. Getting back to mentoring, we have a real focus on building these relationships between students and faculty, and getting students to learn how to negotiate working with a faculty member. So if I'm going to not show up for class, emailing in advance and saying, hey, I'm sick. If you're having trouble with a paper, requesting help. If you want to talk about where to go to college or career ideas, really, going to office hours, being a part of that. Going to TA office hours. So if there's a teaching assistant for the class and you're working on a problem set, making sure that you go there first. And when I talk about our alumni, I'll talk a little more about that. And the goal is to really gain this confidence. And I think, what the research has found, that students think differently about themselves after this experience. So they have a different conception of themselves going into their full-time college experience. And hopefully that really persists throughout that experience. The nationwide research, Brian Ahn, who's a really distinguished quantitative researcher, found tremendous benefits from programming, particularly for first generation low-income students benefiting the most from dual enrollment strategies. And so, that's a lot of how we develop programs now, is to say we want that group of students who really right now, based on their trajectory, college might not be in the picture, but with this programming, this is a group who might benefit a great deal. There's another group of students, who might already be in AP classes, who might get something out of a dual enrollment experience, but you won't have the same level of impact because they might already be on a trajectory. They're doing great. This is a few credits. It helps them with cost, but it's that group of students in the middle and towards the bottom there that really could see the most benefit. Julie Edmonds has done the most amazing research looking at early college students across North Carolina, and she built her research into the lotteries for North Carolina's programs. And so she's been able to study matching up students who made it into the program and students who didn't, and has really found students are more successful in high school and in college, able to finish more quickly, and able to show that it's not based on students sort of getting into an early college or getting into dual enrollment. The students she's dealing with, they were randomly assigned. And so that's what makes her research that much more powerful. American Institutes for Research did a great study showing that if you put $1 into early college or dual enrollment programs, it generates $15 in public and private benefit. And so it's in terms of cost effectiveness, it's almost off the charts. And then Anthony Jackson is a sociologist at Harvard, and he wrote a really great book about how connecting students to faculty, to support services on campus, to the campus, that this is critical for low-income students at a college, and that this active navigation and learning how to do it, you should build that into your early college and dual enrollment programs. And so a lot of what we do is steered by that kind of research. I have a couple alumni profiles I'll just share really quickly. So Seminay Santiago was a student in Lawrence at Lawrence High School, and she went to the College of Holy Cross, which is a very kind of selective institution in Massachusetts. And she says that this going to office hours was really an important part of being successful freshman year. She also told me that the first thing she did was form study groups in her classes, and then those study groups became her friend group, and that became her social network. And so she kind of built everything off of this. But she's been very successful. She's now a sort of health sciences major. Jean Espinal is at Brown University, and he was one of our early college students in Lawrence. And he felt that the early college really helped him find what he was passionate about. He was very used to talking to faculty and teaching assistants. He struggled freshman year at Brown with signing up for sort of like a bunch of activities and trying to balance that with his coursework load. And so the second term, I think he took off from activities to really focus on his classes. But he's a biology major and doing great work. But another student where he immediately upon getting to campus, immediately upon getting to class, is looking for when are the office hours, when are the TA office hours, how can I get help, because I know this class is going to be a challenge to me. Emily Siri is more of a humanities student, and she's at Bennington College. And she felt that, again, this being able to connect to your faculty, being able to connect to the people teaching to you was important. She liked being in classes with sort of regular undergrads at our college, at Merrimack College. So not only in sort of cohort classes, but in classes where she's with another group of students who she hasn't met. And she said, that the program helped her focus on what she's learning in class, and to not think about what people around you are thinking. She said, I needed to tune them out. I need to focus. I need to do the work of the class, and I can't worry about what else is going on in other people's heads? I've got to focus on the class. And I think that's, I'm impressed by her sophistication. This is one of our psychology professors, Lori Kurtziel, and the professors we've had working with early college and dual enrollment have just loved it as an experience and seek it out and want to do more of it. And it really does help, you know, it gives them a strong sense of meaning and purpose. And so I think all I feel very lucky that we've had faculty who've liked it so much. Turning a little bit to why I think rural areas are the perfect areas to develop these programs. From what I've seen so far in terms of the programs I've seen developed in rural areas for early college or dual enrollment or for mentoring, people do think about building a system rather than thinking about building a program or think about connecting up a system. And so I was on a panel with a gentleman who had built really he was building a structure around dual enrollment that was starting with the high school, connecting to a community college, connecting to a 4-year, but also connecting throughout to things like workforce development. And so I think there's an advantage to going into a program like this, already thinking that way, rather than saying, I want to create another program, I want to apply for a grant, I want to create a nonprofit. I mean, there's a real advantage and you get ahead of the game, thinking about a system and thinking about how it connects up to other systems. Early college and dual enrollment programs thrive at maybe a maximum of 400 or 500 students in, let's say, a 4-year program. So the size of buildings in rural America actually maps pretty well onto what really works for early college. In most urban areas, the focus has been, boy, we have this enormous high school, let's break it up into sub-schools, and then maybe one of those sub-schools will do early college. And that's a difficult road to go down. But if you already have buildings where, you know, adults are already connected to young people, where there's already mentoring relationships, those are the building blocks you can use to build on things like dual enrollment or early college or bigger mentoring efforts. You know, across North Carolina and across Texas as well, community colleges have really been the engine of that drives dual enrollment in early college and mentoring. And so, you know, focusing on those community college connections that are, you know, people who are already embedded in the community, people who are already committed to it, who you don't have to convince, and who have a range of programming that students are going to be attracted to. So one of the nice things about community colleges is they can range from transfer-oriented programming to move to a 4-year, to music production, to programs that really end in a trade. So that's a really powerful partner to have. You know, I live in Massachusetts now, where every good idea you have, somebody else had 2 years ago. You know, and there's so much competition for public attention or public dollars, and it drives a lot of great innovation. But I think in a way, in a less crowded environment, people can just sit down and say, hey, what's going to be good for students and young people in this community? And let's do that, versus saying, oh, you know, we'd like to partner with this institution, but maybe this institution will give us a better deal. So I think actually a little less competition and fewer choices can help people design a program. The other thing that's come up in some states, and some of you might want to chime in about this, but there is a potential for a 5th year of high school, college, a sort of hybrid where students go through 4 years of high school, they spend a year doing something like an early college or dual enrollment, and then they do college full time. And states have been willing to fund this in some cases, like in North Carolina. And this is a really powerful sort of lever, both for areas like STEM or areas like healthcare, where the freshman level classes are so difficult to get through that extra year of taking some math, taking some physics, taking some chemistry, that can really provide the kind of firepower to move into full-time study. And especially if the state will pay for it, it's an amazing opportunity. In terms of looking at early colleges and the mentoring research, you know, one of the hard lessons about running a mentoring program is that if your goals of the program don't line up to the goals of the participant, that's where I always say that things go really wrong. And so one of the things the research says is that whatever you're designing in terms of an early college program or mentoring program, it has to align with what the students and the families involved, really what their goals are. And that building off of those is really the only strong foundation that's going to hold up your program. And then the other piece of research that's important is just how important, if we're giving students messages about college or about their career, or messages about themselves and what they can do, building a really positive and safe environment is important first, and building those relationships so that really then you can have more honest conversations down the line. Otherwise, young people, as all of you know, tune you out. But those are just two pieces of research that I try to keep in mind. And when I don't keep them in mind, that's when things go wrong. All right, and this is our graduation. This is our last in-person graduation we had in 2020, and it's just an amazing picture. All right, so let me stop sharing.
Thank you, Russ, for that wonderful presentation. Just to kind of frame some of the actual best practices there. And, you mentioned building systems as opposed to programs. Very, very profound. I mean, sometimes we do get wrapped up into, making sure that the funding's there and making sure, we design the program. But at the end of the day, it's your connections, as you're saying. Focus on connections with the community colleges, the actual workforce, especially, for rural areas to move forward in, and to actually improve the outcomes per se. Any other specific insights or suggestions that you have for our rural practitioners?
I think I appreciate you bringing back up the working on systems rather than, I love designing programs. So I'm not making fun of anybody when I say that. And that's always what I think about in any situation. But I have to say, when I'm watching new programs get developed now for early college or dual enrollment, what I'm seeing is institutions saying, okay, so we're going to have a series of classes that students will take. And we want to have for each track, such as, a health sciences track, we want to have an employer involved with us from the beginning in designing that. And we want to have internships or workforce development opportunities during that. So can we start with job shadowing? Can we then move on to, maybe can we do a paid experience over, the junior year summer? And so I see more going forward of people thinking ahead, especially to what families and students are going to find attractive about the program. And so students find, the idea of getting college credits and saving money and excitement of a college class, they find that interesting. But if you can connect it up to, and eventually this leads to a career. And while you're training for that career, you can get paid in the meantime, can be very powerful. Some of the programs in Texas have a whole early college program that's connected up to a major corporation, like an AT&T, in which that company really invests in those students and invests in that curriculum as it goes along. And I think those are really powerful in terms of especially convincing families that this is a good investment of time and energy to say, hey, AT&T is coming to our school and they're going to present this challenge to our students, and our students will have to solve this problem, and they'll present to people who work at AT&T. If that's your ninth grade curriculum, that really is powerful and sends a powerful message about early college that a lot of other things won't. There's a couple things in the Q&A. Do you mind if I just grab them while we're?
No, that we can go ahead and do that. Timely, I believe Michael actually dropped a couple of questions there. What funding is available for dual credit, and is Gates still funding? And how much? How could he tap into that?
Yeah, so those are two really good questions. So I believe the Gates Foundation is out of the early college business, but it's been taken over by particularly like local and state level foundations. State governments have become a much larger funder of early college. Some districts have become funders. Under all of the relief dollars that are coming out, I think those would be, part of working with those relief dollars, federal relief dollars, is around both equity and also learning loss and kind of getting students back on track. And so I think that will be, I think some districts and some institutions will tap into that for early college. But I've gotten funding from the state of Massachusetts, from the Smith Family Foundation, It's not as easy a sell as I would think, but it's out there. And I think more local foundations are getting interested in it as a way of community development. And then the second question, people in the research have debated this and the number of credits that students should get. So our program right now delivers about 16 credits per student, which is about 1/2 of a year of college. There are other programs that really deliver closer to 2 years worth of credits. So it depends philosophically where you stand. I think, that cutoff of around 12 or 16, that's a good number to aim for, just because lower than that, it might not have as big an impact on the student's career. But once you get up to that, 16, 20 number, that to me is a good number to aim for. I don't think the research has found any decline in sort of the impact of the value as you go up from there. Sometimes it's a little harder to transfer because colleges just don't like, sometimes they just don't like getting a lot of credits. But that's part of the frustration of our field, is that some parts of it are out of our control and don't make a lot of sense.
Good. I think so far that's the last question coming from the queue here. Let's look at mentoring is a verb, your book there. Mentoring definitely plays a significant role in success, especially for high school years, as well as through the college years, and even into your career, as you can appreciate, right? So as I looked through that book that you wrote, lifted up some key elements, right? Especially in chapter 6, starting at ground zero, as you titled it, focusing on mentoring young men. And as I reflect back, there is a group referred to as My Brother's Keeper Alliance.
Yeah.
They also have some guides and some materials, and really focus in on the importance of the importance of strength-based approach, right, to mentoring, really providing a positive impact. And with all the experiences with our young men, especially young men of color, what insight could you share with our listeners to keep in mind when mentoring young men of color?
So the frustrating, so I had, as part of our Gear Up program, we developed both a young women's leadership program and a young men's leadership program. And I was very proud of the young men's leadership program. We brought together a really great group of mentors to work with students over a series of Saturdays. We took them out, we did an etiquette dinner, we did amazing activities. They got to meet really great professionals. But that was 10 years ago. And when we had a Zoom session to catch up with a bunch of those guys now, they really, higher education had not made the positive impact in their life that you would see with a similar age group of young women. And so I think, to me, they all were, they were all employed. Many had gone into really entrepreneurial ventures that were doing really well. And they were, very focused on their own family situations and having those be positive. And so the news was overall good, but I think the connection to education that they felt did not persist. And in a lot of ways, maybe, the system we have just did not, just failed them, just did not kind of welcome them and help them move through the system. And I think over the past 10 years, statistically, the situation for young men hasn't gotten any better. I mean, it hasn't, and in many of the indicators is worse. And so I think that's just continuing work, I feel a need to be involved with, just because, as you look at something like dual enrollment or early college, right now, the majority of participants by far are young women, which is great, but there's this kind of group of young men who could benefit from these programs, but maybe don't feel it's for them, don't feel it's focused on them. They might feel they need to work really to help support their families. So, there's a lot there for us to address. But I think it's, I'm encouraged when I see programs developing tracks or developing interest areas that are going to just grab young men. Like I'm always I'm always happy to see that. And so I'm hoping that moves forward.
Yes, and definitely, I'm glad that you've shared there's opportunity to improve, right? Opportunity to expand upon the foundations of these systems,
Mhm.
and access to these systems, for all different types of students, right? And especially appreciating the relationship building that comes with mentoring programs and preparing for those opportunities. Sometimes people don't even know that those opportunities exist until it's too late, right? And there again, equity plays a role into that. And so our rural practitioners definitely, as they work toward improving the process, improving the systems, keeping in mind that there are quite a different set of youth out there,
Mhm.
right? Different experiences in terms of community, families, and culture,
Mhm.
and being able to tap into that in some way as you're building the actual opportunity. And as we, kind of hopefully continue to move in that direction of improving mentoring programs for young men, we're also working with another challenge in terms of the pandemic, right? What lessons from the pandemic can you share that impact the work that is being done with the students?
So it's a mixed bag. I think for mentoring programs, it's been really hard to run any kind of mentoring effort during this pandemic, and a lot of programming that might work really well in person over Zoom is just hard. We have a program on campus, Big Friends Little Friends, that works with pairs of undergraduates with young people on the wait list for Big Brothers Big Sisters, and that was a dynamic, interesting, fun program on campus when we were in person, and over Zoom, it was just like a bad class. And students, for the participants, for the young people, they'd been in Zoom school all day, and then they didn't want to do anything else with Zoom. So I think on the mentoring, in terms of the strength of relationships or building relationships, it was hard. And I think a lot of practitioners got really creative and might have been able to navigate it, but across the board, um, I think it was just terrible. And the isolation of young people as a result is they're just more isolated and not connected, and not as connected to their schools, to their peers, to other adults. On the plus side, I have seen we did launch a dual enrollment opportunity for students in some high schools based around the pandemic that were remote and were just offered as, hey, this is a chance for you to take one class, see if you like it. And students really responded to that. They couldn't do sports because of the pandemic. They lost a lot of activities. They might not be able to work. And so this freed up some time. And so we had about 100 students participate and had a good experience, in part based on, they were pretty bored and they, might not feel that connected to school, but this opportunity kind of gave them some faculty to interact with and some near peers. And you got to be in a class with people from other high schools. So there's some opportunities, but overall, I mean, particularly for mentoring programs, I just, I admire the people who really persisted in those relationships and kept them going, because it was not easy.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, we do have a concern sometimes about the being zoomed out or Zoom fatigued, right? And really have an opportunity for that innovation of how to engage around opportunities for the
Mhm.
student as they're moving forward in their academic, journey. So I like the whole idea of raising the opportunity to maybe explore a class,
Yeah.
and begin to just kind of have that experience there and getting acquainted with some of the faculty. That's a wonderful opportunity there. High impact practices really benefit students through the enhanced engagement. Anything engaged around the academic experience, purposeful tasks, just even if it's creative in nature, but purposeful, right? And I also know that research has it deepening the learning experience is definitely, a direction to go into, and definitely boosting the academic performance, especially, for students from historically underserved population is very key. And at the end of the day, Russ, as we know, we push for that mark of higher at graduation rates, right? And that's the main thing, and to be successful in their career. As we're wrapping up here, in terms of various questions, I don't see any questions here in the queue. But what are you most excited about in the coming months, Russ?
It's been great to have so we have our early college students back in person, and so I'm hoping that really helps them. Last year was very tough for them in terms of being part of they're being part of a remote high school, so they're at home trying to deal with high school, and then they're at home trying to deal with the college as well. And they're, over the course of that pandemic year, their kind of grades and engagement just kind of slipped down. So I'm most looking forward to kind of maybe them perking up a bit and being engaged and really doing well in their classes and having a really great experience. I think I feel as though the students were good at persisting last year. It's time for them to kind of thrive and have just a better experience. So I'm looking forward to that. I think there's also a lot of energy out now in schools and in communities around, what can we do differently, or what can we do better, or what, if we, if all of a sudden we do have some extra funding, can we move it in this direction? So, I see a lot of hope there too.
Excellent. And, I think this particular conversation really provided several best practices that one could actually begin to think about and incorporating into their work, especially around college access and success. Thank you so much for being with us today, Russ. And thank you also those who joined in as listeners today. We're looking forward to moving into October, and we'll be focusing on affordability and also looking at the FAFSA process in terms of application and featuring the National College Attainment Network. So we're really excited about the direction that we're going in with our Conversations for Action. Stay tuned, stay connected, and stay in the actual college access and success lane, and as we press forward for better outcomes. Thank you, Russ, and
Thank you, everybody.
And take care. Have a great school year.